So far we're beginning to see what some of the questions are that are asked in metaphysics with respect to the problem of freedom and determinism. And I'm going to use some examples that are found in a book called, it's actually Metaphysics, Riddles of Existence, written by two professors of philosophy, Theodore Sider and Earl Connie. I'm taking this information and these examples from Chapter 6, Freedom and Determinism, which is written by Professor Sider. And we're going to try to really make clear what the problem is here. Now, the first thing to think about is what we've just talked about. Something seems to be correct, and we all seem to believe it. That is, we seem to think in general that people sometimes act freely. In fact, before I asked you to dig down and think about what your motivation was, for ending up in the class and discussing some weird stuff about epistemology, you were all convinced you did that of your own free will. You said, gee, this is great stuff, I'm glad I'm here. Or maybe you said, gee, it's a little bit weird, I wonder what I'm talking about. But you still thought that you came there of your own free will, and you either commented or did not comment of your own free will. Now that's part of the problem. So that most of us believe, or just about everybody believes. Well, Professor Sider talks about the Ozzy Osbourne case. Imagine you go out to the Hayden Planetarium and they take you to a telescope and you look out, into the telescope, and what you see is out in the heavens somewhere, there's it's some kind of space junk, cosmic, asteroids, rocks, etc. But it forms what looks like the letters that make up the name Ozzy Osbourne. And you say, wow, that's really weird. Somebody must have, maybe the guys on the space station or somebody else must have done something to arrange that debris so that it spells out the letters for Ozzy Osbourne. Now, if somebody says, no, it's just an accident that all that stuff came together and says Ozzy Osbourne, you'd say, wait a second, that's crazy. Things don't just come together like that. Something causes that. And why is that? Well, there's something else that we believe, which I'm going to call number 2. That is, we think everything has a cause. So the Ozzy Osbourne thing didn't just sort of happen, but something caused it to happen. Maybe you think somebody went up into space, some humans did that. Maybe you think extraterrestrials did it. Or maybe even you think somehow it's a natural event. But even the natural event, the planets formed. There's no such thing as a random planetary kind of event. Okay, so then think about this. Your actions, all humans' actions, they're just events, right? They're things that go on. Well, if all events have a cause, if everything has a cause, including, it would seem, human actions, well, then the person could not have done anything other than he did do. That is, if you're coming to class and talking about weird questions in epistemology, whether you really know that there are tables and chairs, if something caused you to do that, then you are not acting freely. So this fact leads us to believe that there's a third thing that's true. And that is, number 1, that people sometimes act freely. And number 2, everything has a cause, are completely inconsistent. That is, 1 and 2, here's number 3, 1 and 2 can't both be true. So Okay, well, I guess I was wrong about number one. Guess we don't act freely. Who cares? What difference? And this is where Professor Sider starts the chapter with a good, interesting example: the kidnap, the kidnapping case. And the point of his case is that moral responsibility. That is, we blame people for what they've done. Somebody walks over you and smacks you in the face. You don't say, "Oh, that's interesting. That was caused. I feel bad for him because that was caused to happen," even though you have this stinging pain in your face. No, moral responsibility presupposes, it assumes that the person acted of his or her own free will. That is, the person could have done something else. And the case that Professor Sider talks about is, imagine you're kidnapped. You're kidnapped, somebody puts a gun to your head and comes along and says, okay, puts a gun in your hand and says, okay, we're going to go and kill this guy. Drags you along, overpowers you, walk up to somebody, pulls your hand on the trigger. So gun goes off, shoots somebody in the head, kills him. Then he goes through some other parts of the kidnapping case. And among other things, you get dropped out of an airplane and you think you're going to die, and you end up landing on somebody, crushing somebody, and killing him. And finally, you're on the ground, you're amazed you're alive, but what then happens? You get arrested and get charged with murder. Well, in that case, you want to say, wait a second, I'm not responsible for that. The person that died that I fell on, that I was thrown out of the airplane by the terrorist, and I end up landing on him, I'm not responsible. I couldn't have done anything else. I'm not morally responsible for that person's death. And a person that got shot and killed, I feel very bad, but the guy put the gun in my hand and he pointed and squeezed the trigger. I couldn't have done anything else. So we think that people are responsible for things. Moral responsibility implies that people sometimes act freely. Number one is true. So here is the tough problem. The tough problem is we believe three things that are apparently inconsistent. That is, that people sometimes act freely, that everything has a cause, and that the fact that people act freely and everything has a cause can't both be true. Now the question is, okay, there's the problem of freedom and determinism. We have three things that we believe that are apparently inconsistent. You can't believe things that are inconsistent, so you have to figure out which one of these things are we going to reject. Are we going to reject number one, that we have free will? Are we going to reject number two, that everything has a cause? Or are we going to reject the fact that 1 and 2 are incompatible, cannot both be true?